Hi, it's Jackie. Do you want to highlight your company on my next episode of the Badass Superstar Selling Show? If so, click below. Hi everyone, thanks again for joining us at the Badass Superstar Selling Show. I'm Jackie Rainforth and we have our special guest, Helen Rose from The Gift of Being Present. Thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
She is a grief recovery specialist. Now, anyone who's been through a personal disaster, we're talking divorce, loss of job, loss of home, financial, death of a loved one, we've all experienced some sort of grief, right?
Absolutely. It's part of life.
It is part of life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's part of the journey, isn't it? So
but
sad.
you know, we grow from it.
Yes.
That's what I love about what I do, is if you can, once you've done the journey with your grief journey, you can really grow from it. You can find a really little gold nugget in it.
Oh.
And it doesn't feel like it at the time.
No.
And it's quite bizarre to say something like that, because it certainly isn't something to be said in the beginning when someone's beginning their journey on grief, because they don't want to hear that.
Right. In the previous segment, we did talk about all the silly things that people can say to you, not intentionally to hurt, but they do sting, right? And it's just because we're awkward, we don't know what to say. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you can give us some advice on that. What should people say when they've got a friend or family member that's in a personal disaster and really struggling?
So one of the things to note, and to that point, is that we might, you don't know what to say because you haven't been on that journey, but oddly enough, even if you've been on the same journey with the same type of loss, you actually still don't know what to say.
No.
So, the worst, there's a couple of things that you shouldn't say. It's like, oh, I know how you feel. Oh, when that happened to me, because then it takes the focus off the person, right? They're trying to figure this out, so it's shining on them, right?
So what you're saying is listen,
walk beside, zip it. That's the one thing, is zip it. But the one question you can ask people is, and I even break it down, it's like, how are you today? Or how are you, because it changes minute by minute, hour by hour. Okay. So if you say, how are you, it's such a general answer,
right?
And how are you today? Because yesterday they might have been okay with what they were going through. Today they might not be okay. They might be okay this morning, but they might not be okay this afternoon. That
is a great piece of advice. So if you know someone that's suffering, that's going through a personal disaster, ask, how are you today? That's such what a nugget of information.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I think what happens is people just pull away because they don't know what to say. And then the person feels even more lonely because they feel like they're being ostracized from life because people aren't reaching out.
Yeah, and people get tired of your grief. They get on with their own life, right?
Oh, okay.
And if the loss is big enough, it could scare somebody that they don't want to talk about it. I remember when I was going through my divorce, I would go into a room and you'd see women put their hands on their husband's, arm, and it's like, well, I'm not going to steal your husband. Oh, you hear that, but you hear that a lot from people that have lost their spouses through death or divorce. Really? It's like, we're actually not out scanning looking for someone new. We're trying to figure it all out. But I don't think it's because it's an insult. I think it's because when something that big hits you in your heart, you see someone else's pain, they feel that need to protect what they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, who knew? I think we go through all of these things in grief, but we don't really understand. I know for me, I was shocked to understand that there are stages of loss and grief, that there are very distinct stages. Once I was kind of made aware of those, it gave me a sense of calm. It really did, because it's like, oh, okay, so this should kind of be expected. Can you share with us?
Yeah, that does two things. Okay. So that lets you know that you're not alone.
True, yes.
And it normalizes how you're feeling.
Oh.
So one of the things that when the stages, there's actually, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross created the 5 stages of grief, but soon discovered at the end of her life, actually, that there were a couple more stages. I think they're coming out more and more, 7 or 8 stages.
Right.
But what's important to know is that the stages are not linear. You know, you're not going to go through the shock, the denial, the anger, the acceptance, the bargaining, and it's done. It's not a one and done.
I thought it was. I thought, okay, I've been through that one, check.
Yeah, no.
Okay, I've been through that one, check.
Yeah,
okay, I'm really winning at this. I'm moving through it. I'm good.
Yeah,
great.
I had a gal once who went through all 5 stages on a Sunday, and I was like, you know, well, maybe she did. But anyway, so in reality, what it is, if you can look at a ball of wool.
Yeah.
It's a jumble of everything in there. And that anger is going to pop out anytime.
Right.
That shock, the shock maybe is the one that kind of, you still say, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this happened.
Right.
And it isn't a one and done. And it's important to know too, is there's not a time frame.
Right.
Some people can sit in that shock for years.
Really?
Because they can't protect, they go into a protection mode because they just can't face what's happened to them.
Wow.
The other thing is, you know, 20 years down the line, that anger pops out of anywhere. You'll see someone just like kind of boom, and that's that, right? It really never, what changes is the intensity of it.
Okay.
In the beginning, it's super intense, of course.
Right.
And then, have you ever seen that movie, It's Complicated, with Alec Baldwin and Meryl Streep? Anyway, she's getting picked up in the car by Steve Martin, and he's listening to a tape about how to get over his divorce. And she said, oh, how long have you been divorced? And he said, oh, well, 2 years. And she said, oh, so in another 2 years, you'll just begin to feel normal. And he's like, begin to feel normal? But that's the whole point, is like we have that expectation that we should get through it. I think a lot of people expect you should get over it, but it's important to know too, we prioritize what someone else's grief means. You know, the thing I hear the most, and sticking point the most for me, is that when you lose a dog, the last thing you should say to someone is, it's just a dog.
Right? If someone ever said that about my fur babies, I would be distraught. I mean, and angry. Because anger is hurt, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Anger is hurt and frustration, right?
Yep. Yeah. And so when you do that, it immediately deflates or diminishes what their feelings are. Exactly. That's why people shut down.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be judged. It was like, but that was my fur baby. I mean, I lost my fur baby 11 years ago, and I still miss him.
Oh, I know when you see the pictures.
I know.
We sound like, I know. Then people think, oh, you're crazy, right?
Yeah.
But you feel it. That's why you tend not to say anything about it.
And that's what happens then, is you're holding in that emotion.
Right.
And that's when the real trouble begins. Because you can't walk through that journey until you honor, like we said, you know, wallowing in poo. Right.
I get it. You know, you said something else that really struck me, because you said you don't know when it's going to happen, or, you know, you can't predict when it's going to happen. I had lost my mom, and I was in Winners one day shopping, and I was standing in line, I don't know, to return something, and someone behind, there was a mother with her new baby, and then her mother, so the grandma, and she just turned around and said, "Hey mom, could you?" And that was it. I just burst into tears, and it was inappropriate, it was unexpected, it was shock. I mean, I was not expecting it, and it blew me away. It really did. Can you tell me more about that?
Oh, I absolutely can. So I had a client who's, I won't give details, but it's a shocking thing. She's kind of just walking around in this zombie mode, and she was at Safeway. So she's got her cart at her car, and she unloads. She moves the cart to go get her purse so she can take the cart back. And a woman had said to her, "Excuse me, you need to move that cart." Well, she just kaboom! It was kind of the tipping point. It was the thing that just sent her to Pluto. And so she was F-bombing this woman like,
oh no,
it was awesome.
No.
But anyway, so she's telling me this story, and we're just howling, because I had a similar experience where I just took all the rage and everything I felt in just that one situation. It just kind of exploded. And so anyway, she thought, well, I'll never see her again. And doesn't the woman walk into her place of work the next day?
Oh my goodness.
She didn't recognize her, thank God.
Yeah.
But I mean, for her to tell me that story, And
Yeah.
we were literally sitting howling at the story because
Right.
this poor woman who felt the need to tell her what to do with her shopping cart. But what was beautiful is it really normalized what she went through. Now, it probably
Right.
wasn't fun for the woman who told her to move her cart,
Right.
but you know, who cares, right?
Well, and
Yeah.
that brings up another subject. I think that we need to be less judgmental. You know, when we see
Totally.
people in strong emotion, we do need to be less judgmental
Yes.
and really understand that different people are at different places in time. And if you see somebody crying, you know, just say,
Yeah.
hey, how are you doing today? That was a
Yeah.
great piece of advice.
Yeah.
In the earlier segment when we were talking about, you know,
Yeah.
what is grief and loss, she talked about, you know, that's her piece of advice, is to say, hey, how are you doing today? Because people change at different times. And I think you're right. I think we need to be more compassionate and empathetic and kind to other people.
Yeah, and let someone else be in their pain body. It's
Yeah.
really important to sit in that pain body for a while. Not always, not a long time,
Right.
but to sit in it for a while because that's where the processing begins.
Right. So let me ask you, does everybody go through that linear or that non-linear journey of grief, like those stages of grief? Does everyone go through some sort of grief or
Well-
stage of grief, or can they skip over things, or does everyone pretty much kind of hit?
I think that if you try to skip over them, you're going to face them at some point. I mean, everybody's
Oh.
different, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a few theories out there that those stages don't actually exist. Now, I don't agree with that
I don't
because
agree with
I've
that.
been through it.
Yes.
But one of the theories that I heard was, as human beings, what we try to do is make sense of it. And so we get to that, you know, I hear this a lot from clients. Well, intellectually, I know. Well, what happens when you say intellectually, I know, is you remove the emotion from it.
Right.
And while that is good, it's also important to honor those emotions.
Well, and you know, coming from sales, I do a lot of that. The fight, flight, and freeze.
Yeah.
Because we are, you know, left brain, right brain creatures. For those of us that sit in their left brain as their normal spot, it's about logic, emotion, analytic, right? The
Yep.
logic brain. And your right side, of course, is your emotional brain. And you know, when you have that emotion, your logic does fly out the window.
Yes, that's
and
right.
so you can recognize it logically, but when you are in that emotional, I think you're right, you really do have to feel it.
Yeah, and you have to understand that you're feeling it, and you have to accept that you're feeling it. I
Okay,
think that's
good advice.
It's like almost like a control issue. Becomes nobody likes to melt down and look like they're out of control.
Yeah,
Right?
agreed.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but and pick your place where you can be in control. That's another really important piece that I tell my clients. Pick your time to grieve too, because you can get into so mired in it that now you really have lost all objectivity, and you need to be able to, you know, when I say pick a time to grieve, you know, take a drive, go into the middle of the field, scream, yell, holler, swear, do whatever it is to make you feel better, pick yourself up, and then carry on. And when I say carry on, I don't mean carry on and forget about it. Just
Right.
like get some control,
Right.
right?
Wow. Well, thank you, Helen
Yeah,
Rose.
you're welcome.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Helen Rose is here today giving us some great advice on personal disaster, grief, and loss, and of course the stages of grief, which we just talked about. And I think what's really important is next session, we're going to talk about why we should be getting, you know, someone like Helen to help us go through those stages. Obviously, you make the journey a lot easier for people. I know what I went through. I wish I had had someone like you with all this great wisdom and knowledge, techniques,
thanks,
tools,
Jackie.
experience
Yeah.
to help
Thank
me through those really tough times, because you know, it was really tough. And so in our next segment, that's what we're going to talk about, all the great things that Helen Rose can do for you. So we'll see you soon. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Listen, if you want to subscribe, you can follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We have new content coming out every day. You don't want to miss it.